Hey guys, what's happening? Welcome back. And for those of you that are new here, do subscribe so you can catch the new spills every week. And after that, don't forget to hit the bell up top so we can squad up in the comments later on. Alright, so now with the continuation of Fear Itself. And I know some of y'all was like, man, dope, you gotta finish this series. And no doubt at the end of the day, I listened to the squad because you guys really inspired me to go back and read these stories and come back here and talk about them, because at the end of the day, it's real easy to get caught up on all the new stuff coming out and get into talking about that and really neglect some of these good stories that also connect with a lot of the stuff we see popping up more recently. And that's another reason why I wanted to do Fear Itself, because even though it's a 2011 event, it's still one of those stories that has pieces of it borrowed from films like Thor Ragnarok. And I talk more about that in the first segment of this playlist, and I got a link in the description if you guys need to start from the top. But also on that note, one thing that I need to be clear about is originally when I was doing these videos, I was just going to make it a two-part setup, just have Fear Itself part 1 and part 2. But after giving it some more thought, I decided to break it up into 3 pieces. And for you guys that follow me on Twitter, you already know because I gave you a heads up a little while back. And Twitter's really my main outlet as far as getting information out like that. But the main reason I decided to make it 3 videos and not 2 is because once again, there's like 120 something issues in this event. And I feel like 3 videos is enough to do the main story justice, and whatever else we do that ties into Fear Itself after can just tag on to the end of that playlist. Alright, so in the first video, I focus more on the daughter of Red Skull and really how her continuing his legacy or even upstaging his legacy is really what started this whole event. And when I say that, it is with the catch that there were things in motion before she came in, but with her lifting the hammer that the Red Skull couldn't, that's what really set it off. But when she lifted this hammer and freed the serpent, it set back in motion this prophecy that Odin tried to bury in order to protect his son who was supposed to die in battle. And that's really where a majority of Odin's motives stem from. At least in this story arc, he's just trying to protect his son. So he figures the best way to do that is to hide a key component of that prophecy in order to save his son. And spoiler alert real quick if you haven't seen Thor Ragnarok, just want to put that out there real quick because this is a component that they borrowed from the comics and contributed to the character Hela. And really what they did in the film was made her called Borson, mixed with Mistress Death, Angela, Gore the God Butcher. But for the sake of this video, we're just talking about Cole Borson, aka the Serpent. Because essentially you have a member of Thor's family who's kept a secret by Odin, then as soon as they get out of prison, they back on the street trying to kill somebody. You know, your classic Jerry Springer episode. But what I want to focus on more in this video is after that hammer was lifted and 2 teams were formed to fight this war for Asgard. And so your first team that was formed alongside Sin, the daughter of Red Skull, this team was called the Worthy. And from left to right you have Sin, who's the daughter of Red Skull, the Thing from the Fantastic Four, Attuma, the Hulk, Juggernaut, Great Gargoyle, Titania, and Absorbing Man. And when they lifted their hammers, they all got new names. Like Hulk, he became No, Breaker of Worlds. But instead of butchering those names, or half of them at least, I just put them down in the description so you know who turned into who. But this is the team that Cole Borson, Odin's secret brother, also known as the Serpent, put together to help him kill Thor. And either they would do it themselves, or they would cause enough destruction and wreak enough havoc around the world in order to amplify the Serpent's power, because he feeds off of fear, so he can beat Thor himself. Because it really didn't matter to him, he'll take the W either way that it goes. But back in 2011, what was real interesting about seeing this team put together and the characters that they picked for the team, and this really goes for both teams, because you had A-list characters on the team, then you had other B-list and C-list even, and really this is something that Marvel did in order to bring more attention to some of the lesser known characters. And Marvel's not the only ones guilty of that. Anytime you have one of these big events that take place by any publisher and have A-list characters in it, they're definitely going to use that opportunity to nudge some of the lesser known characters into that limelight. And Fear Itself was no different. And also with this team being formed of different characters who either had their own standoff series or other characters who you mainly saw in another series, whether it was Juggernaut with X-Men or the Thing with Fantastic Four, what this ended up doing is creating a gang of tie-ins for each one of these characters. And that's really the reason why this 120 plus list of tie-ins really stack up like that. But it's really not a bad thing, because at the end of the day, we got a lot of cool versions of different characters who over the years really wouldn't get much of a change. So now, not too long ago, if you guys remember a video I did where Wolverine became a vampire, Fear Itself is a bigger series that runs along right next to that. Because if you go back and read that series, you'll also notice that at that time, the Juggernaut was also in prison. And the way that came about is Illyana went to Sidorak, where the Juggernaut gets his power from, over in the Crimson Dimension, and she pretty much just snitched on him. She's like, your boy out here using other people's powers, he picking up hammers and stuff. And really this was done with the motive of stripping the Juggernaut of his power because he was turning up Utopia, which was the X-Men's base located in San Francisco at the time. And she did convince Sidorak, who in turn wanted her to be the next host, but Colossus took her place instead, which was pretty badass to watch. And it remains to this day one of the most iconic transformations for the Colossus character himself. But with the team, the Worthy being formed formed and their task just being pretty much to tear up everything, this gave us some pretty epic battles in the process. And I'm gonna keep it 100 with you, like all this action didn't go well for the heroes for the most part, because for the Youth and Revolt tie-in, their series really got caught up in a wrong place, wrong time type of situation, because with Kuurth making his way across the states, he had to pass through Nevada, and pass through is exactly what he did, because nobody, like before, nothing could stop the Juggernaut, but after an Asgardian upgrade, that really became true to the next level. And so in the Youth and Revolt issues, you had this team where Captain America pretty much assigned Richie Gilmore, aka Prodigy, to put together this team that would pretty much be like your new version of the Avengers. And once again, this is very much an example of this bigger event giving these smaller or lesser known characters some shine. And much like Prodigy, a few of these guys did have the potential of doing something or even being interesting in their own right, but it's like all of that got crushed when they got in the way of Juggernaut with the Asgardian hammer. Like they had no chance whatsoever. And to their credit, I will say the most that these characters got out of this series was the exposure for one, but narratively it really just showed the heart that these guys were going up against impossible odds and they would probably die in the process trying to save some people. But that's about it, because they weren't ready to stomp with the big boys. Because for one, you had Thor versus the Thing, who became Angrir, Breaker of Souls, and also fighting off the Hulk, who became Null, Breaker of Worlds. And these guys tore down many blocks, exchanging blows back and forth. And to be honest, this said a lot for Thor as a character, because him going up against the Hulk and Thing, not in their regular forms but with the Asgardian upgrades, like this was no simple task by far. And like if it was just Thor versus the Thing, like one regular version to the next, like before the Thing had his hammer and became Angrir, like if it was that version of Thing versus Thor, I would have to go with Thor on that one, both with Mjolnir and even without, because also with the playing field being made more even between the two and the Thing getting his own hammer as well from an Asgardian Allfather, like he still didn't last too long. And on top of that, he had the help of the Hulk on his side. So really he had no excuse, because the Hulk is like the LeBron James of all Marvel fights. Like he is guaranteed to get you to the finals, but after that you gotta put in work too. Like you can't just rush into the battle with the Hulk, lose, and then blame it on him. Because at the end of the day, it's like, dude, what was you doing? Because Hulk, regardless, he's gonna smash. All you gotta do is play your part. But I can't totally bomb on the Thing, because before he was fully taken out, he did go up against Red Hulk toe to toe, and in that matchup, he put the paws on him. But his winning streak was short-lived. I guess he flew too close to the sun. And with that, I mean trying to take out everybody else after. But needless to say, Angrir, which is the Thing, he got wrecked. But for all my Thing fans, there's no need to worry, because he was in good hands between Franklin and Val, because they were there to look after him in the Fantastic Four tie-ins. But with him out of the picture, this left Hulk and Thor still going toe to toe. And even though these two have had their bouts in the past, at this point in this series was hands down one of the most crucial. And before everybody goes crazy in the comment section, no, this is not your most powerful version of Hulk. And if I had to put it on a scale to say how powerful Hulk was at this moment, or better yet, do a rating of most powerful Hulks, no Destroyer Worlds would definitely make top 5. And I mainly say that because in order for Thor to win this fight, he has to use every ounce of power that he has. And when he strikes Hulk, it's like he was turned into pure thunder himself. Like it was kind of berserker if you ask me. But when he does this, it literally knocks the Hulk into space to the point where he lands on the other side of the globe. And this is how he ends up in Romania, where he faces off with Dracula. And I did a separate video on that. I'll leave the link in the description. But it was pretty crazy, because that's when we got an example of how strong this version of Hulk was. Because in that storyline, he had to break through adamantium in order to get to Dracula. But like I said, we covered that in a separate video, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that right now. But Thor, on the other hand, after all this fighting, he is totally spent. Like literally, he collapses in the middle of the street. And it was really at this point when Thor had went down where things got as darkest for the heroes. And even though Hulk and Thing are out of the picture, Juggernaut at this point is still a threat. You got the Serpent, who's getting stronger every minute as the Worthy wreaked more havoc. And at this point, he was just insanely powerful. He broke Captain America's shield with his bare hands like it was a cookie. Like he was that strong. It was nothing to him. And really with all hope lost, because like I mentioned, there really weren't no heavy hitters that could really stack up to these guys. Hulk wasn't even on their side. Thor was down for the count. Like it was really looking bad. And I already know right now, a ton of you guys are watching, you're like, where's Blue Marvel? This is a level 8 threat. And don't worry, I got you. So during the time that all this was happening, Blue Marvel was actually exploring the negative zone. And for those of you that are new here, you're not really sure who Blue Marvel is, I'll leave a link to the playlist so you can check that out. But long story short, dude is mad strong. Like he's out in these streets beating up Hulks and all that. But when he returns, it's really after everything had went down. And when he gets back heading to his underwater prison, he runs into one of the creatures that was guarding the Serpent's tomb. And this is kind of a flashback too to the video we did where we were talking about his different abilities and his strengths. In the time where he lifted that submarine out of the water, that was because this this same creature had struck it down. But yeah, when we see him handle this situation, it just shows you how easy he would have took care of some of the stuff in Fear itself. But that's one of the things you just see with these larger events. The writers will find a way to take your more powerful characters and place them somewhere else, just so that the stakes seem more critical and it's not like a walk in the park. But yeah, that's where Blue Marvel was, and that's how the situation went down when he came back. But that's well after all of this was said and done. And so now this battle between Iron Man and Great Gargoyle, he became Mokk, Breaker of Faith. And when Iron Man went up against him, he barely got out with his life. And at this point in time, Iron Man was using his Bleeding Edge armor, which is one of his most advanced suits. But even with that, everything he would throw at Mokk, for the most part, he was just taking it. And I really feel like this battle, out of all the different battles, was the one that kind of turned the tables and really was an eye-opener to Tony and made him feel like, okay, we need help. Because not only was he losing this fight against Mokk, formerly known as Great Gargoyle, but this was also one of the battles where we saw a lot of casualties take place around them, including the death of Doug Johnson, who came to help him out. But while you were fighting, everywhere you looked, you seen civilians that Mokk had turned into stone. And with that happening left and right, and Doug actually dying in the act of trying to save Tony, like, it really weighed heavy on him. But at the same time, his death wasn't in vain, because it showed Tony that in order to take these guys out, that they were going to need firepower that was beyond this world. And he had to figure out where to get that quick. Because if he didn't, him and all the rest of the heroes would soon share the same fate. And that's what really took Tony to a place of desperation. Because at this point, the casualty count was just way too high. And after seeing all that Mokk could take, he's only one of the worthy. But after seeing all that he was capable of and all he could take, with the addition to a last blow that Tony gave him that should have been fatal. But with him taking that and still not dying, and Tony giving that hit, draining most of his power, he pretty much knew from there that in order to beat these guys, that they had to fight fire with fire. And that's really what led him to go to Odin for help. And you might be kind of thinking, why didn't Odin come down in the first place and just end this? Well, initially he did, and that's what kind of got it here. And before, Odin's way of doing it was pretty much wiping out the human race. And initially Captain America did ask Odin to step in, and it wasn't really like he was asking, he kind of ordered Odin to do it and got like blasted and relocated. But at this point, with Thor nearly dying and Thor pleading with Odin, kind of using that as a bargaining chip, Odin ended up giving his blessing for Tony to get access to the Uru metal. Because when Thor recovers, he still has to face the serpent. And once again, as far as Odin can't fight this battle for him. And we learned that previously when Odin banished the serpent in the first place, that he can't kill his brother. It's an old Asgardian thing, it's just the way it goes. But that's why he ended up imprisoning him many years back instead of killing him. And back then, the serpent really wasn't aware of Thor until that last minute where Odin imprisoned him, also letting him know that he could be killed, and how. So because Odin can't fight this fight for Thor, his plan really is to give Thor special armor, the Ragnarok sword, and create a team that Thor can use to fight at his side, just like the serpent has on his side. And with a handful of spellcasted weapons made for specific heroes, that's exactly how he plans to do it. And every time I think about the part where Iron Man falls into this pit, I can't help but think of that slight hesitation that Odin had when he told Thor that there's a chance that Tony might get burnt to a cinder, because he actually had to wear the suit in order for it to work. But for everybody else, it was just weapons and armor, and for them, they would just pick it up and it would take its form on them. So now Thor's team was called the Mighty. And as far as the members of this team, you had Spider-Man, Red She-Hulk, Doctor Strange, Hawkeye, Iron Fist, Black Widow, Ms. Marvel, and Wolverine. And so now finally, with this team being assembled, the heroes finally had a fighting chance. I mean, you got Wolverine with Uru metal armor covering adamantium claws. Like, what is he not finna cut through? But with Odin doing this, he feels like he's giving Thor his best chance of winning this and hopefully not dying in the process. So now with all the heroes having their new armor, new weapons, new abilities, like initially when Tony came back, he was like, what happened to Captain Shield? Kind of like, had I known, I would have asked and got him something too. Maybe, maybe not. But even if he did know, I highly doubt that Odin would have made anything for Captain America because of the way that he got in his face before. And aside from that, why wouldn't he? I mean, Hawkeye got weapons. But as far as Captain America, it kind of worked out because with Thor using the Ragnarok sword and that really being the weapon he needs to use to take down the serpent, Captain America, on the other hand, ended up lifting Thor's hammer. And if you guys remember Age of Ultron back in 2015, where Steve Rogers almost lifted the hammer, this is one of those events that it was kind of a nod to. And when this happened, I really feel like Mjolnir in a way was kind of like, you know, I don't like Odin either, so because what you did getting in his face, you cool with me. But between the matchups on the battlefield, this really gave Captain America a fighting chance at going up against Sin, the daughter of Red Skull. And that's really all the heroes really needed, was a fighting chance, because when the serpent came back, he elevated to a level more powerful than ever. I mean, he had reached power to a point where his physical form actually took on a serpent. But with the heroes having the tools that they needed, they were able to inflict damage also that they couldn't do before. But as far as the battle between the serpent's Worthy and Thor's Mighty, it was inevitably a never-ending battle until either the serpent or Thor was dead. So really, until one of them fell, this all-out war would have kept going on and on forever. Which personally I wouldn't mind, because we would have got more of Wolverine in the Asgardian armor. And I want to say that skin's also available in like Marvel Heroes or something like that. Like, I gotta look that back up and see. Let me know in the comments if you played it and you have it. But really, this battle comes to a point to where the true victor is the prophecy that's been spoken so many years ago. And with Thor using Mjolnir for a lift, he reaches the head of the serpent where he throws a striking blow. But from going into this battle and battling the serpent so hard in all this time, in the back of his mind, he knew the price that he had to pay. And when he finally killed the serpent, the same prophecy that Odin tried to protect him from had been fully fulfilled, as they both fell to their death in the battlefield. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Like I said, this is part 2 out of 3 now. So in the third video, we'll talk about some of the aftermath that took place shortly after. So if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss that. Hit that thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. And if you haven't checked out any of the tie-in videos, I'll leave some links up here and also put some down in the description as well, so you can check those out in case you missed some of the tie-in videos where I elaborate a bit more on some of the events that took place during this series. But that's it for this one, and I'll catch you guys on the next spill. Alright, later.